3,000 years ago, where 20 million people now live, there was only wind, water, and endless plains. The first settlement rose here during the Zhou Dynasty. They called it Ji, meaning thistle, a humble beginning. For centuries, Ji remained a frontier outpost, caught between Chinese civilization to the south and nomadic warriors to the north. It was a city defined by walls and by the threats beyond them. In 938 AD, the Khitan people swept down from the steppes. They made this city their southern capital and gave it a new name, Yanjing. For the first time, Beijing tasted imperial power. The Qing Dynasty followed, renaming the city Zhongdu, central capital. They built the first great palace here, but their glory would be short-lived. A storm was coming from the north. In 1215, the armies of Genghis Khan reduced Zhongdu to ashes. The palaces burned for a month. The old city was erased forever. But from these ashes, something greater would rise. 50 years later, Genghis Khan's grandson returned to these plains. Kublai Khan would not merely rebuild, he would create the greatest city on earth. He called it Dadu, the great capital. 1 million workers labored for 9 years. The city rose on a perfect grid, centered on lakes and gardens. At its heart, a palace complex that would stun the world. In 1275, a young Venetian merchant arrived at the gates. Marco Polo would spend 17 years here, astonished by wonders Europe could not imagine. His words would echo through centuries. The palace of the great Khan was painted in gold, silver, and vermilion. 10,000 guests could feast in a single hall. This was Kambaluk, the city of the Khan. Dadu was the crossroads of the world. Merchants from Persia, scholars from Arabia, missionaries from Rome, all came to serve the Khan. For one brilliant century, East and West converged here. But empires rise and empires fall. In 1368, Chinese rebels stormed the gates. The Mongols fled north, their dream of eternal rule shattered. Dadu was abandoned, but not forgotten. For 50 years, China's capital was Nanjing in the south. But in 1403, a new emperor seized the throne. Yongle had grown up in Beijing. He would bring the empire back. Yongle commissioned the greatest construction project in history. 1 million workers. Forests stripped from 3 provinces. The finest craftsmen from across the empire. His vision, a city that would last forever. For 14 years, the hammers never stopped. The Forbidden City rose from the earth. 9,000 rooms arranged in perfect symmetry. A city within a city, forbidden to ordinary eyes. In 1420, the Forbidden City was complete. Emperor Yongle walked through the Meridian Gate and ascended the Dragon Throne. Behind him lay the greatest palace ever built. Before him, 500 years of unbroken imperial rule from this very spot. That same year, the Temple of Heaven was completed to the south. Here, the emperor would pray for good harvests, walking the sacred path between earth and heaven as the Son of Heaven. And to the north, Tiananmen, the gate of heavenly peace, proclaimed imperial power to the world. From this gate, edicts would be issued. From this gate, history would be made. But Beijing's emperors never forgot the threat from the north. In 1505, they began rebuilding the Great Wall, this time in stone and brick. The mountain fortress of Battling rose first. The wall would eventually stretch for thousands of miles. But its message was simple. This city will not fall. Beijing had become the heart of China, and the empire would protect it. For 2 centuries, Ming Beijing flourished behind its walls. Scholars studied in the examination halls. Merchants thronged the markets. Artists created masterpieces. It was China's golden age of stability. But in 1644, rebels breached the walls. The last Ming emperor hanged himself on Coal Hill, overlooking his burning palace. After 2 centuries, the Ming had fallen. But Beijing would survive. Within months, new masters arrived. The Manchu armies rode through Tiananmen, their queued hair marking them as conquerors. The Qing Dynasty had begun, and they would rule Beijing for nearly 3 centuries. The Qing rebuilt what the rebellion had destroyed. They kept Chinese traditions but added their own. The palace signs became bilingual. The empire expanded, and Beijing became capital of the largest China ever known. In 1750, the Qianlong Emperor, perhaps China's greatest ruler, commissioned a birthday gift for his mother. On the shores of Kunming Lake, he would build a garden paradise. It was called King Yuan, the Gardens of Clear Ripples. We know it as the Summer Palace. The Summer Palace became an escape from the Forbidden City's formality. Here, emperors could breathe. They could paint. They could imagine themselves as simple scholars on a boat, drifting through paradise. By 1800, Beijing was the capital of a third of humanity. The emperor ruled from behind walls, unseen by ordinary eyes. The celestial empire seemed eternal, but the world was changing. In 1839, Britain went to war over opium. China lost. The unequal treaties began. For the first time, foreign armies approached Beijing, and the empire that once awed Marco Polo trembled. In 1860, British and French troops finally reached Beijing. They found the Summer Palace and they burned it to the ground. The destruction lasted 3 days. It remains China's deepest wound. Empress Dowager Cixi rebuilt the Summer Palace decades later, but the old glory was gone. The empire was wounded. The 20th century approached, and Beijing would face its greatest trials yet. In 1900, Chinese rebels called Boxers attacked the foreign legations in Beijing. 8 nations sent armies to relieve the siege. When it ended, Beijing was occupied by foreign troops for the first time. 11 years later, 2,000 years of imperial rule came to an end. The last emperor, a 6-year-old boy named Puyi, abdicated. The dragon throne sat empty. China became a republic. The republic brought chaos. Warlords carved up China. In Beijing, governments rose and fell like autumn leaves. The Forbidden City became a museum. The last emperor became a forgotten ghost within. In 1924, a warlord's coup expelled Puyi from the Forbidden City forever. The last link to imperial rule was severed. A year later, the Palace Museum opened. The palace belonged to the people. But peace would not last. In 1937, Japan invaded. Beijing fell almost without a fight. For 8 years, the Japanese flag flew over Tiananmen. The city survived, but millions died across China. It was the darkest chapter yet. After Japan's defeat in 1945, civil war erupted between nationalists and communists. By 1948, communist forces surrounded Beijing. The nationalist general chose not to fight. He surrendered the ancient city intact. On October 1, 1949, a man from Hunan climbed the steps of Tiananmen. Mao Zedong looked out at the massive crowd below. He raised his hand and spoke words that changed China forever. The Chinese people have stood up, Mao declared. The People's Republic was born. Beijing was once again capital of a unified China. A new era had begun, and so had a new transformation. Mao had won China. Now he would remake Beijing in his image. Soviet advisors arrived with grand plans. The ancient city walls came down. In their place, a new capital for a new age. Tiananmen Square was transformed from a private imperial plaza to the world's largest public square. The Great Hall of the People rose on the west, the museums of history on the east. This was where the masses would gather, for celebration and for revolution. The new Beijing was a city of bicycles, millions of them, flooding the widened boulevards. Work units replaced neighborhoods. Ideology replaced tradition. Chairman Mao watched over every intersection, every wall, every heart. In 1966, the Cultural Revolution exploded. Red Guards flooded Tiananmen, waving little red books, chanting Mao's name. Ancient temples were vandalized. Teachers were humiliated. Families were torn apart. For 10 years, chaos reigned, and Beijing was its epicenter. In 1976, Mao Zedong died. 1 million mourners filed past his body in the Great Hall. The revolutionary era was over. But what would come next? No one could yet imagine. Mao's mausoleum rose in Tiananmen Square, a monument to revolution. But behind the scenes, a survivor named Deng Xiaoping was planning something radical. China would open to the world. Beijing would transform again. The 1980s brought change at dizzying speed. Private businesses sprouted. Television arrived. Fashion appeared on streets that had known only blue and gray. Beijing was waking from a long dream. In 1989, students gathered in Tiananmen Square, demanding democratic reform. For weeks, the world watched as young people filled the space where emperors once processed. The ending, on June 4th, would scar China's conscience, but the drive toward modernity continued. The 1990s erased the old Beijing at breathtaking pace. Hutongs fell to make way for towers. Ring roads circled the city like ripples in a pond. The skyline reached for the clouds. In 2001, Beijing won the right to host the 2008 Olympics. The celebration was unprecedented. This was China's moment to show the world what it had become and what it could build. 7 years of construction transformed Beijing yet again. The third airport terminal, the National Theater floating like a pearl, new subway lines threading beneath ancient streets. Beijing was becoming two cities, the ancient and the ultramodern. And rising from the Olympic green, a stadium unlike any the world had seen. They called it the Bird's Nest, a giant cradle of steel ready to welcome the world to Beijing. On August 8, 2008, the 8th day of the 8th month of the 8th year, the world came to Beijing. The opening ceremony of the Olympic Games announced that China had arrived. The Bird's Nest blazed with light, and 3 billion people watched in wonder. The Olympics showed Beijing to the world, but they also showed Beijing to itself. The city discovered it could dream bigger, build better, and stand proud among the great capitals of Earth. Today's Beijing is a city of contrasts that would astonish every emperor who ruled here. Autonomous vehicles share roads once traveled by imperial sedan chairs. Coffee shops nestle in hutongs, where mandarins once walked. The ancient and modern have learned to coexist, sometimes uneasily, always dramatically. The city continues to grow, to build, to transform. Daxing Airport opened its wings like a phoenix. New districts rise where farmland stood just yesterday. Beijing never stops becoming something new. And still, at the heart of it all, the Forbidden City stands. Its golden roofs have watched 3,000 years of change. It has outlasted every dynasty, every invasion, every revolution. It endures. From marshland to megacity. From wooden walls to glass towers. From imperial throne to people's capital. Beijing's story is the story of China itself, always changing, always building, always reaching for tomorrow while honoring yesterday. The Forbidden City is forbidden no more. It belongs to all of us.